Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and if you are the type of person, which I know that you are, if you're the type of person that wants to turn vision into actual execution, then you're in the right spot in today's episode because we are joined by an incredible guest and fellow entrepreneur who is going to not only hammer that message home, but importantly, he is somebody who's going to show us the roadmap to actually getting there, all while doing also a lot of good in the world. Let me introduce you to this amazing entrepreneur and guest. His name is Robert Carmona. Robert is a strategic leader and executive advisor with more than 2 decades of experience leading complex public sector initiatives. He has helped guide nearly $1 billion, with a B, $1 billion in capital projects and public-private partnerships, aligning vision with operational discipline and long-term sustainability. His teams have earned more than 35 national and regional awards, and he has been recognized as a 40 under 40 leader by both the Phoenix Business Journal and the Arizona Daily Star. He is also a fellow of the Academy of Parks and Recreation Administration. He's the founder of the Carmona Collective and serves as executive director of the Carmona Foundation, which, to tell you just a little bit about his business, the Carmona Collective is a people-first strategy and leadership firm that helps organizations turn vision into real executable progress. They work with leaders navigating change, building something new, or closing the gap between where they are and where they want to be, which I know that we all have that feeling in our businesses, and that's why I'm so excited about this one. Let's dive straight into my interview with Robert Carmona. All right, Robert, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Yeah, Brian, thanks for having me today. Really excited to join you today.
Heck yes. I'm so excited to get inside that mind of yours because there's so many aspects of the way that you run your business that is a shining example of how so many of us can aspire towards. But before we dive straight into that stuff, Robert, you've got to take us beyond the bio. Who's Robert? How did you start doing all these cool things?
Yeah, Brian, it's interesting. So I'm in Arizona. I grew up in Tucson and live up in Gilbert now. And I really started my career, I spent 20 years of my career in government. And that all started simply from the standpoint that after high school, I actually went out and worked for Homeland Security. And after about 4 years and I went home, I was talking to my parents and they basically were like, what do you love to do? And at that point in my life, I really loved parks and recreation. I loved being able to create spaces in which people got to, mentally, physically, and socially sort of be together. And it led me to a random position as an assistant recreation manager. And it took me about 2 weeks in that role to realize, you know what, I want to be a parks and rec director. And crazy enough, it happened a couple of years later. I'll just share with you that my boss at the time, one of my best mentors, she couldn't have been more supportive, handed a piece of paper on my desk and was basically like, hey, I saw this position. I think you should go after it. And there was a place, Wickenburg, Arizona. I can honestly tell you I had no idea where it was. I thought she was trying to get rid of me. But really what she was doing was trying to push me outside of my comfort zone and say, here's something that you could go do and start yourself. I was about 2 months before getting married. And going to tell your fiance, hey, how do you feel about packing up right before the wedding and we'll move to Wickenburg right after we get married is quite the conversation. But it really just kind of blew up from there. And I'm thankful for the people that just stood up and gave me a chance to prove to them that really wanted to do some good. And going to a place like Wickenburg, you're thinking 8,000 people in Arizona outside of Phoenix. Couldn't have been happier with that decision. Some of the world's best people live in that city, and I'm incredibly thankful. And then it led me to Gilbert. And Gilbert is sort of like a parks and recreation paradise of all young families, median age of about 33 to 34 years old. And we were able to build some really amazing things out here and kind of world-renowned parks and be able to put those not only in kind of a design and creative mode, but into operations mode, really setting a standard for how you can bring private sector thinking into public sector models. And really enjoyed my time in Gilbert. And then after about 8-9 years, you start to think about what's that next evolution going to look like? What do I want that next 20 years to be? And it actually led me to sort of leave at the top of my career within Parks and Recreation, which is probably a crazy thought to most to walk away from, but I'll share with you just a quick story, and then can kind of go on from there. But it was July 4th weekend. I was with our children in San Diego at a parade. And it was the first July 4th I'd spent with my family in about 15 years, because every July 4th I was always working. And I happened to be on paternity leave, and I saw all of the kids walking together down the street, holding hands. And it's something that's just been burned into my mind, because I even had a sketch built of it. That's really something that led to being like, what do I want the next 20 years to stand for? And as much as I love the people that I was working with and what I was doing, it kind of signified that it was the right time, that I wanted to make an impact in a larger way. And that led to Carmona Collective and the foundation, which I know we'll get into in a little bit.
Yeah, I really appreciate that overview to kick things off, Robert, because you articulated in such an eloquent way so that I don't have to say certain things here on the air, but you phrased it as private sector thought and thinking into the public sector, which I'm sure that you're well aware that so many of us private citizens, we look at parks and rec departments, we look at government in general, and we think to ourselves, why don't they just get things done? Why does it seem like everything is so complex? There's so much red tape to get through. You excelled in that environment because you knew exactly how to go from vision to getting those things across the finish line. Is it skills that it took? Is it patience? Is it the right relationships? What is it that we harp on when we look at government's inefficiencies?
I think it comes down to passion. And I think that passion played a role. So, I'll get on my soapbox within Parks and Recreation. I remember when I first got into Parks and Recreation, everyone was sort of like, that is just a nice to have. It's one of those things that, should we be investing that kind of money for something that is a nice to have and sort of a luxury item within communities? And that was one of the first things I keyed in on and said, we're looking at this all completely wrong. And I'll never forget, I was at my first city council meeting at one of the cities I worked for, and one of the mayor at the time told me to keep the grass green. And that was sort of almost like a battle cry for me my whole career, because that was the thought process within what Parks and Recreation and government services can provide. And I was out to basically show you only know a fraction of what it is. And they were saying it in jest, because they were one of my biggest supporters moving forward. But really, at the end of the day, you look at, when I went into Parks and Recreation, it was about changing the business case of what it actually provides back to the community. And if you could look at all the government services, how many of those government services actually can improve your physical health, your mental health, and your social health all at the same time? And that's really what Parks and Recreation provides. And when you think about investing in communities in those spaces, think about all of the good that takes place in all of those community spaces, the programs, the events, the social interaction. And to take it one step further, what we wanted to do was bring that clarity into what the business side of Parks and Recreation looked like, that you can no longer just run it as free programming all the time, but choosing which areas can be free programming, which areas need to be more of a business model, in which areas you can show that cost recovery and sort of those business principles, and sort of having public-private partnerships to help kind of bridge that gap. And really, I think when you look at the whole structure, it's really taking a step back and putting it in a relatable format for the public to understand, here's where we are, here's where we're going, and here's what it takes to get there. And one of the things we implemented was a completely full-on dashboard transparency model, which kind of showed exactly the whole story. And you can't just show 10,000 dashboards with numbers and figures. You got to break it down into what's the actual story behind it. So we were one of the first Parks and Rec departments at the time to bring on data content strategists and storytellers, so that we could actually translate the model of what we were doing into how people could understand it. And that led to tremendous success, not only support-wise of kind of being able to build support for hundreds of $millions of projects and what those could deliver. But also, you think about the people behind the scenes, gave support to the people behind the scenes to understand what their true goals and mission are and what they're accomplishing. And you put all that together, and I think that really tells the story of what's going on behind the scenes and can translate that story into something relatable for people that aren't in it day to day.
But Robert, hearing the way you talk about this stuff, I've got to call it out, because I think that most people, colloquially at least, we often separate vision from execution. We pretend that they are two completely different spheres, two completely different functions, and of course we hope that they get meshed together at some point in the process, because that's how things get done. But it seems to me, in the way that you talk not only about these stories and your experiences, but really hearing the words that you use, which of course is a reflection of how you operate internally, that that you do operate within the marriage of both vision and execution. Some people look at vision and they say, I've talked to fellow entrepreneurs where they say, oh, vision's the easy part. It's execution that's the hard part. And then the opposite people will say, oh my gosh, execution's so easy. I wish I just had that vision. What's your take on that, on the marriage of the two and where the difficulties and challenges lie?
Brian, I think one of the things I always focused on was we always started with vision, because I think it's impossible to do execution if you don't know where you're trying to get to. And you also have to understand the why of what you're trying to get to. And I think so often we miss the why of what's really behind where we're trying to go. And that why needs to be bigger than ourselves. So I'll give you an example. When I was doing a strategic plan internally for a department that I was running, I think so often you'd say, okay, what does the public need from us right away? What is the strategic plan to help them? I kind of had a different model. My thought process is always, how do we start that internally? If we can't take care of our personal, side of it and our employees in-house and see what their vision is and what they're struggling with, what tools they need to have to succeed every day, it doesn't matter what we want to do for the community, we're not going to get there. We need to build that model vision-wise of what our employees and the people need from us. You gain that trust and credibility within your internal sector, and then it really opens up the ideas of how many other visions your employees have and then how you can serve the community, which goes into execution. And I think so often we just skip past the people side of it. And so one of the things we do with Carmona Collective is it's always been about the people. That's one of our tag marks. And that is something that we always focus on, because the people so often get left out of the process. You start these master plans, you start these strategic plans, you start these visioning plans, and how often do you get to the end and people in your own department or area don't even know that it was happening? And I think that's a misstep all along the way. And so I think there's a balance. And I think the other side of it is, how do you take the visioning and then turn it into an executionable strategy? And so I think that's where you really use kind of updated technology and dashboards along the way, so that whenever we had a strategic plan or a goal, and we still do this with our clients today, and I did it in government, everything we do from a visioning standpoint gets moved into an actionable document or something dynamic, not something that sits on the shelf, something that you can update every day, something that you can see what goals we're hitting, what the metrics are, what those targets are, but more importantly, the why behind it. How does it relate back to your mission, vision, values, and goals? Who are the actual team members working on it? What type of assets do those team members need to actually be successful in what they want to do? And building that into sort of a dynamic document that you can check on, it brings everyone together. And one of the other things, I love to do in that vision to execution model is the people that are actually doing the work should be the ones presenting the information sometimes, because you want the other team members around the table to know what they're going through and be their biggest cheerleaders. And so often you find sometimes you have the same exact goals and you didn't even realize it, or you're working on the same thing. So I think it starts with vision, it kind of blends into execution, but it's that clarity and alignment that happen in the middle, which make all the difference into what those executionable strategies are. So that's kind of how I blend those two worlds and how I've went about it through my career.
Well, then I'm going to totally put you on the spot right now, Robert, because speaking directly about the nature of the work that you do with the Carmona Collective, that started out merely as a vision in your head. And obviously now you are doing incredible things through your company and also through the resulting foundation, which I'm so excited to talk to you more about what that looks like. But through that lens, Robert, what did first the vision look like? Because I know how much businesses evolve over time. And then secondly, when you decided, hey, I've had this amazing career up to this point, but I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to own my own business. What did that transition and actual execution look like?
That's a fun process. So I'm going to take a step back before we move forward. And so I talked to you a little bit about seeing the kids walk down the parade route on July 4th. That vision actually started about 2 years before that. My wife and I went on a vacation together, one of the few times without kids. And we were sitting on a patio looking out at the redwood forest. And it was one of those moments in time where you really start to look at, what can this look like? And I think the reasoning is you love what you're doing, you love your job, and I miss the people every day that I had a chance to work with in the organizations. But we really started to ask the question, how are we making a bigger impact? And I think all of this comes down to what's your true why and what impact you want to make. And my impact has always been about how we can help all of the other people around us. It's never been about how is this going to affect Robert or how is this going to benefit Robert, it's really been, how does this help everyone else? And I think when you spend enough time in certain positions, you start to feel more like an asset. And I never wanted to feel like an asset overall in the roles that we do. And it's one of the most important things I try to do for my employees and also our clients is you're never an asset. This is never transactional. We'd rather have 20 clients that we get to form a deep connection with than have 10,000 that is just more transactional. And I think when you start with that process, it really brings light to where you're trying to go. And I can't say it's the best business model because when you're going and talking to people and you're pitching, sometimes starting is working with less. Everyone looks at you like you're a little bit crazy. Like, what kind of business model is this? But I think that's the intentional approach that we wanted to take, where it was 2 years before we had the idea, sort of thought about it. And it was that moment on July 4th where it launched, you know what, this is probably the right thing to do. Is it going to be hard? Is it going to be a challenge? Is it going to take way more effort? Are there going to be some financial setbacks along the way? Yes, but what is that ultimate goal in finishing it? What is that ultimate goal going to end up looking like when we're able to accomplish it? And so I think it's setting those initial steps. And we talked about visioning. We had visioned what that plan would look like because when we wanted to do Carmona Collective, we wanted to make sure we focused on the strategy side, which was that vision to execution and helping people find that alignment and clarity. But then also the leadership side. Because so often we have these plans in place, but no one actually has the leadership training or practice or someone in their corner to help guide them on how to get there and have a consistent person in their corner. So the leadership side is able to sort of teach along the way of how you kind of follow through on those plans. And then you probably figured out by now, I tend to be a big idea thinker. I like the larger projects. I like sort of the crazy ideas. And we started a ventures division, which was really how can we take people that have really creative ideas and creative processes and support them along their journey. And I'm just going to give you one quick example of just something that you get really excited about. I was able to meet a gentleman who developed a product because he spent his whole life in a scooter, wheelchair. And when he got married, and this is the exact story, our first meeting, when he got married, he wanted to take his wife to the beach because she had never been there. Well, he couldn't get down on the beach. And he couldn't join her on the beach. She just had to go down there and he had to wait above. And so he created a device to be able to have people with accessibility challenges go onto the beach and go onto spaces they've never been able to go to before. And just hearing a story like that right away, you're like, this is exactly why I wanted to jump into this realm. It's not to support me, but it's how can we make these people with these other big ideas, visions, and dreams be successful and bring our lens to it and be their champion along the way. And that really what led to kind of creating all of these divisions and formats. But at the end of the day, that story, it takes intentional time. And I remember sitting the team down and having those intentional moments of, hey, we're going to start this slow. We're going to start this slow. We want our first few clients to know that they have our full attention. We're going to knock it out of the park. And we want this to feel like a different interaction than you experience with any other consulting group or client. Because it is about the people. And I think that's what started it. And then when you build that trust and credibility, you don't have to advertise because those contacts and those people are spreading the message for you of here's why you want to work with this firm is they believe in what you're doing and they want to help every step of the way. And we may not be the right person for every single group, but the right people with the right mission that want to lead their teams to where they need to go. And those are the ones we want to get behind.
Yeah, I so appreciate the way that you share that so openly with us, Robert, and really that it's that intention that I want to go deeper into, because not only intention in the way that you've grown your business and also the way that you've grown your team and your client base and all of those things, but I would imagine that you have very carefully and intentionally designed what the process looks like with your clients as well when you engage with them, because like you said, these are big projects. This is impactful work, and it's sometimes complex work. When you deal with humans, what's more complex than dealing with people and culture and operations and all of these? So, Robert, what does it look like when you all step into a business? What's that process that you get to first clarity and then uncovering that vision and then, of course, to execution?
Yeah, I think it all starts with relationships. And I think you really have to understand who's across the table from you. And when we sat down, and I got to tell you, when you start a team and you start it from scratch, it's incredibly meaningful when you have people that signed on for something that they don't know how successful it's going to be, that are leaving other positions to go about it. And it brings that sense of clarity that you can't let them down in this process because they're believing in you, and you have to, do that back. That's the same mentality, the same thought process we take to clients. so often, you could sometimes think, well, they're coming to us, they want to work with us. Every interaction I've ever had with a client is thank you for choosing us. Because if you're going to trust us in this journey, one, we want to get to know you better. What's your why? What's your vision? So we really sit down from the start, before we even talk about the projects, like to understand their culture, their team, their kind of decision-making processes, the different personalities and sort of interests within the internal team that are going to be working on the project, and then let them get to know us a little bit, get to know our communication styles, because if you don't start with those, you're going to have a whole lot of missteps along the way. So when you step in the room with us, that's how we made kind of an executionable, intentional way of let's build our relationship first, and then let's start diving into the projects. And we talk about that vision and execution and strategic planning. So then we really sit down and we kind of have a mapped out system that we like to do, but at the same time, none of it's cookie cutter. I think one of the things you got to do is customize it to an approach that it has to be good for that client that you're working with. So we customize that approach, but at the same time, we always have the same conversations of where are you trying to get to, when are you trying to get to it by, what are those sort of potential blocks that could be along the way, who are these going to benefit, who are they going to serve, and we dive through each and every one of those topics to really understand what that process looks like, because you never want to miss a stakeholder as well. You never want to get to the end and realize we didn't reach out to someone or we didn't talk to somebody. And then when we really start to reach out and dive deeper, it's really about creating trustful conversations and relationships where every client we work with, every town council, every town manager, every CEO knows that it's a personal connection that we are having, that we are wanting to learn more, and we believe in what you're doing and we want to get there. And then we turn that all into actionable strategies where once you have that trust and credibility built together based on those relationships, then you can really move to the next steps. Was here's how we're going to get you to the next level. Here's some of our recommendations and steps so that they can trust that process. And the other thing is you have to keep your ego at the door. It's never been about whatever we say is the one that goes. We kind of take the approach that whatever we say opens the door for additional conversations so we can work through it together and find what works best with your particular scenario, your particular project. And then we build that same actionable strategy that I mentioned before, a very clear roadmap with clarity and alignment that we all sign off on the beginning saying, here's our roadmap, but then also knowing there's flexibility along the way. My dad grew into me at a very young age, flex, adapt, and overcome. Those are the three things we learned growing up, and those are the three things that I've always kind of carried into business, that we have to remain flexible, adapt to the current changes, and overcome whatever obstacle comes in the way. And that's the same approach we take to our clients to get to that next level for them.
Oh, I love that, especially because as entrepreneurs, I think that that's the first thing that we all learn when we start our businesses is nothing is going to go exactly as planned. And I don't know if it's business school or the academic world or what, but I remember my junior year of college, we had to create a business plan for a real life business in the Boston area that we were working with. And then the following semester, those business owners would come back and they had a seminar and we would talk to them about it. And we thought we were so brilliant, Robert, with every single step of the way that we had planned out for that business. Of course, none of it went to plan and all of it goes out the window. It's like that famous Mike Tyson quote where he said, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. So having that North Star, having the vision, incredibly valuable, but also being flexible. It's so great to hear how much that is deeply embedded, not only in the way that you think, but really the way that your company operates. So really cool hearing those insights. Robert, I have to go here with you on the air though. I've been so excited about this part of the way that you operate is the fact that the Carmona Collective is also steward of the Carmona Foundation. That's not a model that we see enough. I like to think that this is a model that we'll increasingly see as time goes on, but introduce listeners not only to the Carmona Foundation, but how that relationship works, because truth be told, one of our founding principles behind this show is a rising tide lifts all boats. And I think that you're such a shining example of how when one thing is successful, it should elevate a lot more things in that sphere and in that ecosystem. So introduce listeners to that.
Brian, the foundation really kicked off everything. So when I mentioned that trip that my wife and I went on, we didn't actually start with a business conversation. We started with the foundation conversation, knowing that essentially the Carmona Foundation existed and is existing, and we're kicking it off to be able to provide financial support for foster care families. And to take you a step further, that one trip to the Redwoods really created everything. And I was adopted growing up. I came from foster care, and it's a very passionate thing. My wife and I are foster care parents, and we've had several placements, and something we dedicate our time to. And when you think about how I want to give back and how I want to make an impact, one of those things we always looked at from the business model is how do we have a business that can also help fund this portion of the foundation? Because there are a ton of incredible families providing amazing work in the foster care system, but don't always have the right financial resources to be able to do it. So to take it one quick step further than that, we have a lot of support, a lot of financial assistance goes towards certain things, but we're focusing more on what is keeping people from being able to be a foster care family. Do you need to have a pool fence installed? Do you need to be able to afford this? You think about the time that it takes to be a foster care family and the amount of investment that your current biological kids may take. Do they need help with financial assistance to have scholarships to sports programs and those placements? And take it a step further, do you need some financial assistance for mental health? Because when you think about the amount of stress level that your family takes on, what are those services that are provided? So we've kind of built this model into, let's have Carmona Collective help fund the foundation, not only with our contacts, but with our people. So right now, we don't take a salary from it. The same people that I pay Carmona Collective with work on the Carmona Foundation essentially for free because we pay them through Carmona Collective. None of those dollars ever change hands. And that was really always one of those goals, is that we build it in a way that it could be sustainable. But it all started with the foundation, because if you have that passion, you have that love that you want to build on, the business model is sort of centered around it. And we always, wanted to build that. And that was one of the reasons that being in government, it's very hard to be able to be in the position I was in and also help run a foundation. And so that kind of all led to, this is going to be our next step. This is going to be our next vision and goal. And the team that I've brought on have that same vision and love and passion. And we want to make the world kind of a better place for everyone around us. And I think if you're ever looking at that, you have to find a gap in the market of something that you are passionate about, that your team can get behind, and then put the work level and the financial part behind it to say, we want to make a difference for other people. And here's the way our company can give back. And I think that all started from there, and everything else has sort of trickled. And so for us, we're very excited about it. And once again, it's taking the intentional approach to create the right relationships with, whether it be licensing agencies or other foster care nonprofits, to understand what are the gaps in the market and how can we support those gaps instead of just trying to take over things that may already exist.
Yes. Oh, Robert, I knew that time would fly by with you here today. I'm super excited to hear the way that you answer this final question, because it's super broad. You can take it literally in any direction you want. And that is, what's your best piece of advice for listeners? Knowing that we're being listened to by both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own growth journeys, and knowing that you are one of us, you're a fellow entrepreneur, what's that one thing you want to leave them with today?
Brian, for me, it's all about, and I say this all the time, it's always about the people. And so if you start from it being about the people, I think it's going to lead to big things. Because not only are you going to create a network of people that are being successful in their own worlds, but you create this larger network of people who are doing things for the right reasons and the right way and want to support you along the process. And people is the one thing we don't invest in enough, and it's one of the cheapest things to invest in because it's more about time than anything else. And are we going to invest the right amount of time into building the people around us, not only building the next generation, but building the current generation and building the relationships that are all going to help us give back in a way that, the more successful projects are, that businesses are, that foundations are, whatever the case may be, it all comes back to the people. And I give you one quick thing. When I was in Parks and Recreation, there was always this thought process that if you built a park and it was the best park around, you had to be competitive with a city that was close by that built a park that was trying to beat yours. I never looked at it as competition. I always looked at it and said, those parks mean more people have access to recreation, and I want to be a team member that supports them along their journey, because everybody wins at the end of the day, and it's really the kids and families that are all winning. So how can you think about building up the next set of leaders, the current set of leaders, and starting with the people versus the business all the time? And I just firmly believe if you kind of have a balance of that, you're going to reach the levels you want to in business because you started it for the right reasons by taking care of the people first.
Yes. Oh, that answer right there, that best embodies the rising tide lifts all boats philosophy. So, Robert, I am so grateful that you don't just say these words, you live them out in the way that you've assembled your team, the way that you serve your clients, the way that you've built your business and the foundation. So much goodness from today. And I'm so grateful for how generous and open and transparent you are in all of these lessons. These are tough lessons that it took you to learn over the lifetime of your career. And you've come on here and accelerated our own growth paths by learning from your experiences. So the only thing I'm going to ask you for from here is to share one more thing with listeners, and that's your links for listeners who want to find your business, the foundation, all the great work that you're doing online. Drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Everything can be found through Carmona Collective. So website is carmonacollective.com. All of our social media handles are at Carmona Collective. So it's the easiest way to follow us. And I will tell you, we're just getting started with the social media journey. And it's one of those things that following our story, we'll be sharing a lot more of those insights as we go with our current clients and future clients, but also taking our approach and philosophy and being, you kind of said it best, being vulnerable about it to say, here's how we approach this. And hopefully you can learn some things along the way. As I've listened to a lot of your podcasts and other hosts, and I learned something from every founder, every employee, every person that's ever been on it. And I try to take those tidbits and see how can I take the best in everyone to kind of help me be a better leader and person along the way.
Yes, and listeners, you see, Robert makes it super easy, carmonacollective.com. But what's even easier is that we're dropping that link down below in the show notes. So no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode, even if you're on the go, have no fears. You can click right on through at any time from the show notes. So Robert, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Brian. Really appreciate it.